The vinyl chair makes a small sound when you shift your weight. The clock on the wall ticks just a little too loudly. You are in a hospital waiting room tonight, and you are here because of a mistake. Not the kind of mistake that puts you in a bed yourself, but the kind that puts someone you care about in one, or near one, or somewhere in the tangle of corridors beyond the swinging doors. Maybe it was something you said. Maybe something you did not say. Maybe a decision you made too quickly or a moment you failed to notice until it was already too late. You do not know yet if everything will be all right. You only know that you made an error in judgment, and now you are sitting here with your hands folded and your heart very small, waiting to see what comes next. This is not an abstract problem. This is not a lesson you wanted to learn. But it is the one in front of you now, and so the question is not whether you failed, but what you do with the failing once the first shock begins to wear away. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes after a real mistake, the kind that leaves a mark. It is not only the tiredness in your body from the adrenaline that has finally drained. It is the heaviness that comes from knowing you cannot undo what you did or did not do. You replay the moment over and over, changing one word, one choice, one glance. You imagine the version of yourself who acted differently, and for a few seconds it almost feels real, as though you could reach back and correct the past simply by wishing hard enough. But the clock keeps ticking, and the waiting room stays exactly as it is, and eventually you understand that no amount of replaying will change what happened. The mistake is done. The consequences are unfolding. And you are still here, still responsible, still yourself. The old wisdom, the kind that survives because it has walked through waiting rooms of its own, would tell you something very simple. It would say that the mistake is not the measure of you. The mistake is one action, one choice, one moment that did not go as it should. What defines you now is not the error itself, but the quality of attention you bring to what follows. This is not a way of excusing what you did. It is not a soft word meant to make you feel better before you have done the work of understanding. It is a way of reminding you that you are not only the sum of your worst decisions. You are also the person sitting here now, willing to wait, willing to face what comes, willing to begin again even if you are not sure how. There is a teaching that comes from Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who spent much of his life trying to govern himself as carefully as he governed Rome. He wrote that when you stumble, you do not remain on the ground forever. You rise. You return to the work. You do not pretend the stumble did not happen, but you also do not let it become the only thing you know about yourself. He was writing to himself, late at night, trying to make sense of the same kinds of failures we all face, the failures of patience and attention and care. He knew what it was like to make a decision that seemed right in the moment and then watch it unravel in the days that followed. And what he learned, slowly and with difficulty, was that recovering from a mistake is not about erasing it. It is about choosing, very deliberately, to take the next right step even when you are not sure your legs will hold you. Right now, in this waiting room, you might feel as though you have lost the right to take any step at all. You might feel as though the mistake has disqualified you from trying again, from speaking again, from making any claim to competence or care. This is the voice that comes after failure, the one that insists you are now and forever the person who got it wrong. But that voice is not telling you the truth. It is telling you a story that feels true because shame is loud and convincing. The actual truth is quieter. The actual truth is that you are still here, still capable of learning, still able to choose what you do in the next 5 minutes, and the 5 minutes after that. Let me tell you about a moment I remember, not from my own life, but from someone who came to see me years ago. She was a nurse, someone who had worked in hospitals for a long time, someone who understood procedures and dosages and the careful rhythm of a shift. And one night, in the middle of a very busy emergency room, she made a mistake. She miscalculated a dose. Not by much, but enough. The patient was fine in the end, but there was a long hour when no one knew for certain, and she spent that hour in a hallway much like the one you might be imagining now, waiting to find out if her error would become something much worse. When she came to talk afterward, she said she felt as though she had broken something inside herself that could not be repaired. She said she did not know how to walk back into a shift and trust her own judgment again. We talked for a long time that evening, not about blame or punishment, but about the difference between a mistake and a collapse of character. A mistake is a single moment when your attention slipped, when your knowledge was incomplete, when the circumstances moved faster than your ability to respond. A collapse of character is when you refuse to learn, when you turn away from the consequences, when you let the error harden into indifference. She had not collapsed. She had stumbled. And the work now was not to pretend she had not stumbled, but to understand what the stumble had taught her, and to carry that understanding forward without letting it paralyze her. She went back to work. She changed the way she double-checked her calculations. She became more careful, not more afraid. That difference mattered. The wisdom here is not complicated, but it is hard to hold on to when you are sitting in a vinyl chair with your heart folded in on itself. The wisdom is this: you are allowed to begin again. Not because the mistake did not matter. Not because you have somehow earned forgiveness before you have even asked for it. But because beginning again is the only dignified response to failure. To refuse to begin again is to decide that one error defines your entire life, and that is not how lives work. Lives are long and full of revision. You will make other mistakes. You will have other waiting rooms. But you will also have other chances, other mornings, other moments when you get it right. The question is whether you will let this mistake teach you something useful, or whether you will let it convince you that you are beyond teaching. There is a small practice you can begin tonight, even here, even now. You can ask yourself what you would do differently if you were given the same moment again. Not in a spirit of punishment, but in a spirit of honest attention. What did you miss? What did you assume? What did you rush past because you thought you already understood? Write it down if you need to, or simply hold it in your mind with as much clarity as you can manage. This is not about beating yourself with the memory. This is about making the mistake mean something. If you can extract one clear lesson from the error, one adjustment you can carry into the next similar moment, then the mistake becomes a teacher rather than a sentence. And then, once you have done that work, once you have looked at the mistake without flinching and without excusing, you can begin the second part of recovery. You can forgive yourself. Not immediately, and not cheaply, but eventually. Forgiveness does not mean pretending the mistake was not serious. It means acknowledging that you are a person who sometimes fails, and that this does not make you unworthy of your own compassion. You would not expect someone else to carry this shame forever. You would not insist that another person remain in this waiting room for the rest of their life. So why would you insist on it for yourself? The steadiest response to recovering from a mistake is not to run from it, and not to drown in it, but to meet it with the same honest attention you would bring to any other difficult problem. You look at what happened. You take responsibility for your part. You make what repairs you can. And then you stand up, even if your legs are still shaking, and you take the next small step forward. That is not weakness. That is not avoidance. That is the only way human beings have ever learned anything worth knowing. Tonight, as you sit in this waiting room, or in the quiet space after the waiting room, or in the long stretch of days when you are still figuring out what comes next, remember this: the mistake is not the end of your story. It is one chapter, one hard lesson, one moment when you were not as careful or as wise as you needed to be. But you are still here. You are still capable of care. You are still capable of beginning again. And that beginning does not require you to be perfect. It only requires you to be willing. Close your eyes if you need to. Let the clock tick. Let the waiting be what it is. And when you are ready, when the door finally opens or the morning finally comes, step forward with whatever steadiness you can find. That is enough. That has always been enough.